Welcome to Parenting Decoded, a podcast for practical approaches to parenting. I'm Mary Eschen. This is a special podcast recording of a seminar at Prospect High School meant for all of you who are having a tough time communicating with your teens. I also have a YouTube version from Evergreen High School that includes all my PowerPoint slides that you can find on my Parenting Decoded YouTube channel. Whether you prefer podcasts or YouTube, I want to get you as much help as I possibly can in supporting your teen. If you have questions, feel free to contact me at mary@parentingdecoded.com. Enjoy the podcast in the meantime. Welcome, everybody. I am so happy to be here to talk to you. And I'm going to really hopefully focus on giving you some great practical skills on how to talk to your teens and how to get them to talk to you too. And in order to do that, what I'm going to first do is I'm going to talk about how we currently communicate with our teens. And then I'm going to talk about what we might be communicating to them when we are communicating. And lastly, when might be the best time to communicate with our teens? Because I'm sure you've all experienced that there are some times where your teen might never talk to you at all. So we're going to go through that together. So first thing I want to do is talk about three types of parents. One's a helicopter, another's I call a drill sergeant, and the last one is a consultant. And I'm going to go into each one of those types of parents. The first type of parent is a helicopter parent. And how might a helicopter parent, it's like you guys could raise your hand on your keyboards to say, do you know anyone who's a helicopter parent? Have you heard that before? Might you be a helicopter parent? One of the things that I find is that the communication type of a helicopter parent is that they tend to nag and they tend to hover. And during that nagging and hovering, we're trying to make the world perfect. And I happen to know a lot about this one because I'm a recovering helicopter parent. I was just the best, most generous, kind-hearted parent to my kids that I could possibly be. I was just trying to solve their problems and just trying to make life be really wonderful. And it was a little bit of a problem because I was giving especially my younger son, I was giving him the misimpression that life was perfect. And so they think that I can fix things when things are going wrong. And they start learning not to fix their own problems as a consequence. The next type of person that I'm going to talk about, a parenting style, I call it a drill sergeant. And a drill sergeant will typically do a lot of yelling and telling because they are trying to get their point across and there is no chance for discussion. This is the parent who wants to try to get their point across and get their kid to obey them right away. Well, as a consequence to this no discussion, they also shut down their kids' opinions. And as we shut down kids' opinions, that means that they're probably over time not going to offer opinions back to us. The third type of parent I want to talk about is a consultant. And some of you might be a consultant by profession. And when you're a consultant by profession, you are typically chatting and talking and doing things where you're not lecturing your clients. You are actually having a conversation and you are trying to communicate with them and listen to them at the same time. And as a consequence, we show respect for people's opinions. And wouldn't it be nice if our kids got that same respect for some of their opinions, even though they might not always have opinions that agree with us? So I want to talk about something that I call seize the moment. And seizing the moment, those of you, everyone on this call has a teenager, and you might have noticed that when they were really little kids, they wanted to say, Mom, 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 look at me, or Dad, see this. And as they approach teenagers, in their middle school years and maybe fifth grade and beyond, they all of a sudden start closing down and they do not want the spotlight on them. When they come home from school, they don't want to say, well, how was your test? What are you doing? It's like, and we turn these bright spotlights on them. And the first thing that they want to do is they just want to shut down, right? So what I want you to do as parents, one of the questions that VPAW sent in ahead of time, one of the parents sent in ahead of time is, how do you get your kids to want to talk to you? And one of the things I recommend is doing something called seize the moment, where you turn off the spotlight and you start doing something that your child might enjoy. It could be puzzles. It could be board games. It could actually be video games, even though many of us are reluctant to get involved with video games. Some video games could be a good bond for some families. It could be card games. It could be taking a drive in the car. It could be gardening, taking a hike, doing art. The whole point of seizing the moment is to create an atmosphere in your household where your child doesn't feel like they have a spotlight on it. It's not about school. It's not about their activities after school. It's just about being together. How do you create a relaxed environment of being together? One of the things that I did when my sons were in high school was my seize the moment was a card game called King's Corner. And in this card game, it's a little bit like solitaire, but multiplayer. And it's a pretty thoughtless game, if you ask me. It's very much up to chance who wins. You have to pay a little bit of attention. And a round of a hand in this game takes about 5 minutes. And I would take my son out to lunch because they were at Saratoga and they got to go off campus for lunch. And I would take him out to lunch. And if he came out to lunch with me, I would pay. If he went out to lunch with his friends, he would pay for his lunch. So he was incented to be with me because I was paying, because he had a budget and he, was learning to manage money at the same time. And we would play just a round of cards. And we would just sit there playing this card game, no agenda whatsoever on my part. It just turned the pressure of him performing for me, of him being grilled by me. It turned him from being defensive to like, hey, I'm just playing a game. And you know what? Out of his mouth came all sorts of information about his coaches or his girlfriend or his teachers or how frustrated he was with school or whatever. But I could never go into that lunch or that card game wanting to extract a particular thing from him. And my husband had the approach of he wanted to turn on the spotlight and he didn't understand why every time he tried to get something from my son would basically, I call it, he would take a step back because dad was coming at him, not meanly or anything. I mean, dad was just, you're just saying like, how was school today? And like, it's like, oh, dad's on me. And, so I created an atmosphere, this seize the moment. Like if your child happens to like to garden, or if they like to do art, or if they like to do paintballs, go up in the Santa Cruz Mountains and play paintball or something like that, find an activity that they like to do. Even if you're so doing it, do it anyway. Do whatever it is. I was talking to a mom of a high schooler last week, and she said that her son wouldn't communicate with her at all. But the one activity that he would communicate with her, meaning have this chill, seize the moment activity, was cooking. He loved to cook. And I said, you keep cooking with that son, because that's your avenue to communicate with him and to open up a bridge to his psyche, basically. So that's how we might communicate in those situations. Helicopters are going to nag and shutting down our teenagers. A drill sergeant's going to tell kids what to do, and then a consultant's going to chat. Well, so how do you think a kid feels when they're being nagged? Like maybe some of you grew up with someone who nagged you all the time. Did it make you feel that you were competent? Did it make you feel good about yourself that somebody had to say, put away your shoes for the 10th time or do your homework, whatever? It's like they're constantly badgering it at you. And it doesn't exactly bring, confidence in you. If somebody's yelling at you, how do you feel? Like if you were a teenager and someone was yelling at you, would it make you feel like you wanted to be with that person? I don't think so. How about when someone's always telling you what to do? Who do you have to tell stuff to do all the time? A person who's being told what to do all the time, the person talking to them is basically communicating that I'm incompetent, that I can't remember anything to do, that I'm stupid, that I'm lazy, whatever. That person talking to me is communicating that I'm not exactly on the ball or worthwhile. Whereas if someone's chatting with you, and I want you to think of your best friend, whether it's your spouse or somebody from high school or college or work or wherever, you have a best friend who you like talking to. And what is it What qualities is it about that person that you like being with them? It's typically a person that values your opinions, that will listen to you, that will make you feel like you're a person and you're worthwhile to being with. So, what I want to say is that sometimes when we're communicating with our teens, sometimes we communicate confidence in them, but sometimes we communicate incompetence. And other times we're communicating helpfulness where we want to help them, but sometimes to the teen, it might come off as interference. So we have to be really careful about what we do when we're communicating with our teens because we can be the ones causing communication to be shut down. So the next thing I want to talk about is when might it be the best time to talk to our kids? Because we've heard the adage that says what we say is important. And I do believe that what we say is important. But I think that when we say what we have to say is even more important than the what. Because if we're saying something that's important at the wrong time, our kids' ears are closed and we're just losing it. We're just, wasting our breath. So we want to figure out when it is that we talk. Well, the first piece of advice that I have to give you is the appropriate time to talk to your kid about anything is not when emotion is involved. When emotion's involved, we need to do this thing that I call go brain dead. We are going to not react to our kids when they are talking to us, when they are yelling and screaming at us, and they make us want to yell and scream back. You're having a screaming match with them. If you have two people screaming at each other where your brain is activated, there's something called the fight and flight center in your brain. And when that is activated, your prefrontal cortex, which is where your executive functions are shut down. All the blood rushes away from the executive function center into our amygdala, that's our fight and flight center, and nobody's ears are open. Nobody's brain is open to higher levels of thinking. So if emotion is involved by our teenagers, it is immediately a do not disturb, do not bother to try to communicate with that child. They might be saying something to you like, Mom, you're the stupidest mom on the entire planet. I can't believe you said that. Blah, blah. It's like they're just going off. And it's like, I'm going to not react. And I'm going to do things like say, they're saying like, I'm a stupid mom. I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, I know. I'm going to agree with them. I'm just going to go brain dead. And I'm just going to say, wow, that's so sad. And I'm not going to get mad and I'm not going to react to them. Because when I react to them, all we are is in a fight and nobody is getting anywhere. So what we want to do is we want to even walk away from the situation, especially if we're getting triggered, especially if our overwhelming desire is to fight back. The time to talk about it is not when all that emotion is running around. You want to wait until things calm down. And then the key here is you want to ask if they're ready to talk about it. Something along the lines of like, a couple hours later, might be a day later. It's like, I noticed that you were really upset about how your grades were, or how your homework went, or how your sporting event went. Do you want to talk about it? And your child might say, no, it's so stupid. They might still be ticked off. So that's another signal of going brain dead. Like, okay, I will check back in later. I love you. And this whole thing about giving them empathy when things are going wrong and being able to ask them permission if it's time to talk to them right now, because this simple question of asking, it's not a matter of us giving up and just letting our kids run rampant over us. It's basically, we're basically asking this question, are you ready to talk about it? It is a check-in to see if their brain is open. Because if their brain is closed, if they're still pissed off and won't talk to you or shut down or depressed, whatever, then you want to be able to know that they're ready to talk about it. And sometimes they are. Sometimes for some kids, it's when they're getting ready for bed and things are just winding down for the evening. And they're just a little less belligerent at that point in the day. And you can just say, hey, I noticed you had a really rough day today. You want to talk about it? And they might roll their eyes and say, no, Mom. Or they might say, well, that maybe their friends were being mean, or maybe it was really hard to get on Zoom today for school or whatever. There's all sorts of things that could be going on in their mind that you can't even guess about because they're not communicating with you. So you want to do that. Go brain dead when everything's all upset. Then when things calm down and you have to wait, then you ask. One thing that parents get a little worried about is when I say that they're disrespecting me, because I was just giving you an example of like, Mom, you're the meanest. You're so stupid. You're such a, and you could, use some bad words on me if you wanted, but I'm not going to react. I'm not going to deal with respect when they're upset. Because if I'm going to deal with respect when they're upset, it'll get me upset and then nobody learns anything. But in this section where I say, when you ask, can we talk about that? That's when I say later, this is hours later, or maybe a day later, it's like, I just wanted you to know it really hurt my feelings when you called me a bad mom. And you let it hang there of like, and they might roll their eyes and like, whatever, Mom. Or they might say, I know. And a lot of times our kids know that they're hurting us, but they are so hurt themselves that they lash out at us because we're there and we're available. So especially with our teens whose brains are changing. And, I'll talk about it more at the end, but I have a podcast. And one of my first podcasts that I did was on the teen brain and how to deal with emotional outbursts and things like that. And, our teens, their brains have sloughed off early in puberty to about half the neurons that they had when they were younger. And so they're all their neurons are being rebuilt and their synapse connections and things like that are being rebuilt. So sometimes they just really aren't thinking anymore. They are not thinking well. And because their brain is kind of shut down and not working. The other thing I want you to do with your kids is I want you to notice things about them. I want you to notice if they put on a new shirt. I want you to notice if they drew some doodle art on their papers. I want you to notice if they made their own lunch or picked up something. I just want you to notice that they're alive. And one of the things that you can notice, like I noticed that your shoes are still in the front hallway. And I want you to use that, but I also want you, if they didn't notice, I don't want you to push. It's like, I don't know. It's like, I noticed you got, you got better at math on the last math test. And whatever, it's like, don't make a big deal out of it. Just notice something. Notice if they change their hair, if they change their eye makeup, if they change their shoes, whatever. I'm going to give you a couple of other skills now. And the first one is what I call setting loving limits. A lot of times in our households, we say, I'm not going to take you to the store unless you do this or that. And what I want you to do is I want you to flip it. I want you to flip it to state what you will do. Like I drive kids to school who are ready and in the car at 7:30. Now, granted, you guys aren't in school right now, but whatever it is like I drive kids to, I don't know, where can you drive these days during pandemic? It's like I serve dinner to kids who've cleaned up their room. I do laundry for kids who've put their laundry in the laundry basket. You want to keep it positive because we have enough negativity in our lives, don't we? To be able to, do anything we want. What we want to do is when we are stating things, we just want to say it positively. Because you can say, I'm not going to serve you dinner because you didn't clean up your room. Or you can say, I serve dinner to kids who've cleaned up their room. I help kids proofread a paper who are treating me with respect. I don't say like, you're not treating me with respect, I'm not going to help you kind of thing. And it sounds so different, doesn't it? And you don't need to lecture about it. It's like when you set a limit, just say what it is. When with littler kids, some of the limits are a little bit, easier to set of like, I serve dinner to kids who've washed their hands, or actually that could be with a teenager too. But we do things for our kids all the time and we want them to do stuff. And so you having this relationship where like you're willing to do things when you're treated nicely and when things are going, like whether it's their chores. I serve dinner to kids who've put out the trash. And that means that I've made a choice as a parent that if my kid doesn't put out the trash, I'm okay with that. I'll put out the trash. But it means what? It means they're not getting dinner. And they might be grumpy about it. And I'm okay with drawing the line of like, I love you too much to argue. And they might go storming off in their room or whatever, and they might come out hungry later, but it's like, oh, that's so sad. Yeah, the kitchen's closed. And you might have lots of battles brewing in your house. And if you do, feel free to reach out to me for more complicated solutions. But I want you to know that setting a loving limit in a positive way can really be impactful. So if you aren't doing that right now, try it. Another thing that kids love is they like choices because they want control. And a teenager wants control more than anything. Tweens and teens, they just feel like mom and dad are putting all their restrictions on them and they don't get any choices or whatever. Well, anything that you can give them to give them choices, do it. Like if you want to allow them to, would you like to take out the trash before dinner or after dinner? You really don't care. I mean, I'm going to say that you don't really care whether or not they take it out before or after dinner. What you care about is what? You care that they're taking out the trash. So just give them a choice. With my kids, when it came to chores, one of the questions that came in was, how do you get your kids to do chores? And with my kids, I said, here are the chores that I need done. When would you like to do them? Would you like to do them on Thursdays or Sundays? And both of them chose to do it on Sundays. And I also said, like, do you want, if their chore list is like 10 chores long and there's 2 of you, which ones do you want to do? And they chose and they said, well, we don't want to do the same. We had a cat and nobody wanted to change the litter box. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine, but you guys are changing it. So do you want to do it every week, one person all the time, or do you want to rotate it? And they chose that they would rotate it. So I gave them a lot of choices. I just told them what in general I wanted. And I gave them choices and I set loving limits. I said, like, doesn't matter to me which chores you do when, as long as they're done by Sunday at 9 p.m. And so they were able to pace themselves to do it by then. And I have other ideas about how to get them to actually do it. If they don't do it, what do you do? But the whole point here is that try to give your kids choices as much as possible. You can give them choices about what to eat, what to put in their lunch, when to clean their room, when to go to bed. I do believe, though, when kids hit high school, we shouldn't be as parents telling them when to go to bed. They should be deciding on their own. We'll talk a little bit more about it later in this talk. But I want you to just think about how you can give them choices. Because one thing is that if you say, do the dishes right now, or if you say, take the trash out right now, at least half the time you're going to get, no, I'm too busy. No, that's stupid. No, this, no, that. So what you want to do is give them choices. Like I said, would you like to do the trash before dinner, after dinner? Would you like to set the table or clear the dishes? Would you like to make the dinner or clean up the dinner? All of those are things that you don't care about. You're willing to do the opposite. And you're not cornering your kid into a box, making them say no to you. And you are not cornered either, because you don't really want to hear that no all the time, because it's so grating on anybody. And one of the secrets, though, is that you only give choices you like. If you really don't want your kid to be, I don't know what, like driving at night, let's say they have their driver's license or something like that, driving at night after 10 p.m., don't give them a choice to drive, to come home from a party at 11 p.m. It's like the choice is, would you like to come home at 9:30 or 10? It's not anything else that you don't like. Another skill that I want you to practice in your house that can really help is that you allow mistakes. And your principal was talking about how difficult it is right now on the mental health of the students with all the pressure that they have for trying to do schoolwork from home and trying to see friends and everything remotely. I want you to be able to free up yourself and them, because sometimes they're going to make a mistake. Sometimes they're not going to study like you thought. And sometimes they're not going to be nice to their friends like you would want them to be or whatever. But I want you to allow them to make mistakes. And if you do it in an empathetic, loving way, those mistakes can grow into a growth mindset where they are understanding that it's just a mistake. I'm going to get past it. Even with the tests coming up and the AP things coming up, it's like, it's so hard. And devastating to any high schooler who has to go through APs anyway, and to have the pandemic level, layered on top of that. It's really hard. And I want them to know that they're going to be okay, that I will love them anyway, that they are trying hard. And even if you don't think they're trying hard, it's a hard time. And I want you to give them empathy. And I want you to give them love and confidence. Even if they make a bad mistake about, in your adult opinion, of like, oh, they're really going to blow that test. It's like, wow, that's hard. It's hard to study for a test when you haven't been in class with a teacher. And I know you're going to get beyond it, giving them confidence with that love and empathy instead of like, my gosh, you should have been studying. I know, we go on and on, yelling, nagging, telling our kids what to do, telling them how to study. It's like, wow, I noticed that you had a lot of studying that you needed to do. Gosh, it's probably pretty hard. If you need any help, you let me know. Instead of me badgering them, instead of me nagging them. When are you going to do your history homework? When are you going to do your math homework? The physics is due tomorrow, It's like, wow, I noticed that the physics is due tomorrow. Do you need any help with that? Must be kind of hard. And doesn't it sound, that's how your best friend would say. It's like, yeah, I know you have some tough stuff coming up. I love you. I know you're going to get this. And even if you don't, I'm going to love you anyway. And that loving attitude that has empathy with it, it can allow our kids to get over a lot. And they have a lot to get over right now because it's a pretty tough time for everybody. But also, if your son or daughter does make mistakes, all that I told you so taunting that I wrote here, it's like, I told you should have studied harder. I told you this. I told you that. It's like, it's not very helpful. It might make you feel better to be able to say those kind of semi-mean things to them about how incompetent they are, but it doesn't exactly build their self-esteem or make them want to talk to you. So if we're trying to figure out how to get our kids to talk to us, try empathy. And so those are the basic skills. We got brain dead. We have giving choices. We have setting loving limits, not nagging, using I noticed and things like that. So what I want to do is, those are all like a bit esoteric. And I want to go through, I'm going to call it a test drive to see if our listening, we should be communicating, is going better. So let's take the topic of when to do homework. Does anybody have challenges with that? I'm assuming, especially with COVID, it's hard for them to want to do homework. It's hard for them to be wanting to be on Zoom even. So what kind of options do you have as a parent to deal with it, when to do homework? Well, first option is choices. We were talking about choices, and what kind of choices could you give? Would you like to do your history homework first or your physics homework? Would you like to do your English homework first or your art project? Would you like to do it before I fix you a snack or after I fix you a snack? Assuming that you're an amazing parent who's working out of the home, who has enough time to make a snack. But giving them a couple of choices as opposed to saying, do your homework right now or do a specific thing right this second. It's not, you're going to get pushback and you're going to get no. So try to redirect them by giving them an option using choices. The other thing you could do in regards to homework, just go brain dead, like, oh, wow, gosh, what a bummer. Give empathy. Like, yeah, wow, that sounds like a lot of homework. And not arguing with them about it, allowing them to own their own work. Some of you might struggle with when to go to bed. I mean, electronics complicates this, homework complicates this, chatting with friends online complicates it. What kind of options do we have given our new skills that we were talking about? Well, the first one, again, is choices. Would you like to go to bed at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock? I mean, a high school student, I wouldn't ask them too much. For those of you who have middle schoolers and younger, choices is probably going to work a little better. Give empathy, like, oh yeah, it's hard to go to bed late. I don't feel good when I don't get enough sleep. How about waking up? What kind of options could you use? Do any of your kids look like that in the morning when they haven't had enough sleep? You can give them choices. Would you like me to wake you up? Would you like to use an alarm? Would you like to get up at 7 or 7:15, assuming that they have to be on a Zoom call at 8 o'clock or something like that? I had one parent who had a middle school boy she got him to come get up by having him, she said, If you wake up by 7, I fix hot breakfast. If you wake up by 7:15, it's cold breakfast. So it's like, that was really an interesting choice that she gave him. And he would started waking up earlier because he liked a hot breakfast. The other thing you can use is empathy. When you wake up late and you're feeling grumpy and your kid is feeling grumpy, you can just say, "Oh yeah, it's hard when you go to sleep late. It's hard to wake up, isn't it? That's so sad. I love you." You just kind of go with it. No need to no need to to berate them or anything. It's just like, oh, what a bummer. Setting loving limits about things like I drive kids to school who are ready by some certain amount of time because maybe someday we'll be back in session. But setting a loving limit about what you do. One of the things that I really firmly believe in for high school students is they should be waking themselves up. Mom and dad should all relinquish all ability to wake the kids up because they need to, if they're going to go off to college and get a job after high school, they need to be able to wake themselves up. And turning over that responsibility early allows them to make mistakes. We were talking about allowing mistakes. Oh, if they forget to set their alarm, it's like, oh, that's so sad. Well, it's easier for them to be sad about it as a freshman than as a senior. And so as freshmen, make sure that all of them are setting their own alarms for those of you who have freshmen still. One of the big topics is when to get off electronics. You have some options. You can give choices. Would you like to get off? Would you like me to turn off the Wi-Fi in the house, or would you like to use parental controls? Would you like to, there's all sorts of software, all sorts of electronics things. I actually do a whole nother lecture, and I have some podcasts on what to do about electronics in your house. But give them choices like what would you like to do to restrict? Would you like to charge your phones and your laptops in the kitchen, or would you like me to charge it in my room? Knowing full well that if they start sneaking out of their rooms at 2 a.m. to get onto their electronics, that it's going to move to your room. You can also put loving limits. I allow kids to be on their electronics who are treating them kindly, where they're not bullying, they're answering the phone in a proper way and things like that. I think it's okay to have loving limits. And I firmly believe that people should have electronics contracts. When you get to high school, if you don't have an electronics contract, you might be a little hosed, is my feeling. It's hard when you've let the candy store open to close it when a kid already has that phone. But if you have younger kids who are in middle school or less, I would certainly look into having an electronics contract, which I have a podcast about it. What's the best advice I could give you? My overwhelming advice is that good communication is going to get you through parenthood. These teen times that you have with your kids right now can be really tough. And the best thing that you can do is think about how you're communicating with your kids, because you can only control you. And as you control yourself and you're wanting to nag, or you're wanting to yell or tell them what to do or control their lives, the more that you push at them, the more you're shutting down, and the more that you change what you're doing to be able to open up things so that your son or daughter can feel like you're on their side, the better that you'll make it through the teen years. Because your kids need you. And if we're coming at them in a really belligerent fashion or a nagging fashion, they're going to want to shut down. They don't want that. They want somebody, not necessarily to be their friend, but to be somebody that they can be around and be relaxed around. So create that relaxing environment that can get good communication open in your life. So what do you do if you just listen to my talk and you feel like you still need help? I have a podcast. It is called Parenting Decoded. You can get it on any podcasting site. And I have a couple of special podcasts. I said my podcast number 2, I have about 27 right now, is all about teens. And what do you do about respect? Because some of you were writing in questions like, my kid's disrespectful. What do I do about that bad attitude? It would be a really good one to go in. You'll hear some of the same things that I just talked about and more. Punishment and consequences. Some of you want to know what to do when your kid is misbehaving in some way that you don't appreciate. And how do you make it be so that you don't rip their electronics out of their hand? Because if you do that, all they do is hate you. How do you give them some other alternatives that allow you to feel like there is a consequence for doing something that you didn't appreciate, that gets to their heart instead of just making them mad at you? I did a really successful podcast on anger management for parents because we need some ideas about how to control our anger, don't we? Because it's easy for them to make us mad, and making us mad just makes the whole situation worse. So if we can control our anger, it'd be a good one to do. I have these screen time issues. The 11 and 12, they go together. 12 is more for the older kids. And I love having family meetings. If you and your family are having some situation that's just a real rub and just causing strife all the time, I would, maybe it's chores, maybe it's electronics or whatever. I would sit everybody down and have a nice meal, have a special dessert or whatever, and say, yeah, we're going to talk about this, and sort of set up parameters, just discuss it and allow kids to have opinions and allow them to express them. I love it. And I do a whole podcast about how to run one and what you could get out of it. I am accessible. You can email me, mary@parentingdecoded.com. I have a website. I kind of have two websites. They all point to the same place. Parentingwithlogic.com is the one I've had for 10 years, but they do point to the same place. I have a Facebook group that I would love for any of you to join. I ask questions about my parents on that group, as well as they can ask me questions. It's called Parenting Decoded 2021. I have Instagram if you want to be knowing when I'm talking, or if a new podcast comes out or whatever. I do a monthly newsletter as well. I do teach love and logic classes, but I haven't been teaching them in the pandemic. I've been doing my podcasting instead. I do one-on-one coaching for families. And I would be happy to talk to you about if it would make sense for your family, if that's something that you'd be interested in. So that is the end of my basic presentation. So I'm going to stop my screen share and allow you all to ask any other questions. Elena is going to be the moderator if you want to type anything in the chat box. And there was a couple of things that came in earlier that Vipal, I think you collected for us, and I could read them in the chat box. One of them was, I said, how do we talk to teens differently as compared to younger kids? I think that the way I see it is that your teens want to be treated as adults, and they want to be able to have opinions, but so do little kids. You're able to talk with them about more advanced topics. I think that you can do something really similar. I just think that the topics that I had with my teenagers were much more in-depth and much more thoughtful than I would have with a little kid. But, a teenager is going to have trouble with friends. And so is a fifth grader. So is a second grader. And so they're going to look a little different, and their emotions run deep, I think, when they get into the teen years. Another one is, do consequences work with teens? I think they do if you set them up well. I also asked at that same time was how to negotiate chores. In my family, I have a podcast all about chores and how I set them up for my boys. And I helped them learn about money at the same time. I gave them a budget, and if they didn't do their chores, I happily did them for them and just charged them in a loving way. It wasn't really punitive, and they understood, and they could make up the work if they wanted to. But I made it really clear that every family member had to contribute. I believe in not paying for chores. I think it's possible to pay for extra projects like painting a fence or something for teenagers. It should be a pretty big deal. But I don't think that paying kids to do the dishes or cleaning the bathrooms or anything, I think it's just part of living in community. But I do think consequences can work. But you have to have a trusting relationship. If your kid thinks you're a jerk and that they think that you're unreasonable, that kid isn't going to want to do anything for you. And if you're at that level, you might need therapists to get involved, or a coach to help negotiate things. But that's why I said it's like communication is so key. If you have poor communication right now with your teen, you have to do something about it, because you will not be able to get consequences to work. You will not be able to get them to do anything for you unless you can communicate with them. So that's why I teach what I do. Let's see what else is here. How can we get our teens to talk with us more? And that's the turning off the spotlight and creating activities that they like to do with you. Even if they aren't your most favorite activities. Any tips to reduce screen time? I think creating family activities can help reduce some screen time. But I think having a family meeting to talk about what's reasonable. And if you have good communication, you can have a decent family meeting about, maybe we should have a couple of hours a day where there's no screens. Setting up screen time, like we have dinner together and there's no screens. That kind of stuff is what I would kind of head for. How can we get our teen to drop their negative attitude when communicating with family, siblings and parents, etc.? Part of getting them to drop that negative attitude is spending some time with them to learn what it is that their big objection is. And it's a little scary because they're probably pretty nasty to you. And so take them out. One of my favorite things was like boba tea. There's something about teenagers and boba tea, at least in the Bay Area. They love boba. And like take them out for tea, take them out for lunch, do whatever, Starbucks, something. It doesn't have to be for money, especially if you're on a budget, but you could go on a walk, a hike or whatever, have them grocery shop with you. Just something that gets them chill and where everybody isn't together. I would spend some one-on-one time with kids. If there's two parents in the house, I would make sure that each parent is spending some one-on-one time with each kid instead of always all being together. They need some one-on-one time. Teens don't seem to they want to hang with us. They don't seem to like hanging with us parents anymore. How much of this is to be expected and how much should we try to have them engage with us? I think that there's a bunch to be not expected for them to stick it out with you and hang out with you and just like, oh, Mom, I'd love to spend the weekend with you. But I think a couple hours here and there is reasonable. And you have to schedule it. You have to negotiate with them. And I think that's okay. I think that it's worth negotiating with them to say would you, and I would give them choices. Remember, we just learned about choices. I would say, would you like to make dinner together on Saturday night or Sunday night? Would you like to go to boba on Tuesday or Thursday? Would you like to do yard work with me on Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon? Just all those things where you schedule it with them and you give them a choice so that they can say, I'm going to go out with my friends on Saturday night till Sunday. It's like, okay, that's fine. And you just be happy with Sunday. So I would do that to create that. Let's see. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, that was a fantastic presentation, first of all.
Thanks.
And it looks like some of the things we were doing are wrong. So we'll probably adjust them. So I have a question here, which is I think you probably kind of addressed this, but so we have a parent who says the kid compares himself with his friends whose parents pay him to do other chores, and now he expects the parent to pay. So how do you deal with things like that?
I would give the kid empathy. I was just talking to some families. It's like, life isn't fair. And that's so sad that, I would say to my son, I have sons, I would say oh yeah, that's so hard. That's well, that's really nice that Bob gets that, but that's not how our family operates. And I think it's okay for you to say, that's sad. Yeah, that's not how our family operates. We're a community and we help each other. And in order to run a household, we need to help each other. It takes somebody to cook. It takes somebody to shop. It takes somebody to clean. And we do that together because we love each other. And if you set that standard up when they're really young, it goes a little better than all of a sudden, wham, they're, sophomores in high school. And they're like, what? Why don't I get paid for A's? Or why don't I get paid for cleaning the dishes or whatever? It's like, yeah, interesting. It's interesting that different families run differently. And I would just recognize it. I would have a discussion with them. It's like, how else do you think other families run their family? I'd use it as a topic of discussion if you can. If they aren't so pissed off at you for refusing to give them money for, basic chores. But, in my family, I just like, it's a bummer, I gave my kids, don't get me wrong, I gave my kids money, but it wasn't tied to chores. I gave my kids money so that they could learn about how to use money. And my kids were fortunate enough that they were in band at Saratoga High. They were in, they had a percussion instructor they had to pay and stuff like that. So I would give them the money and then they would pay it. And that's how, if they didn't do their chores, I would just hold that part of the money and they'd have to figure out, like, get a part-time job or whatever to be able to afford to not do their chores. But they did their chores because they understood that we were a family. And they had friends that got paid. And I just, I love them. Like, yeah, that sucks. Our family, we operate differently. Does that help?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I would say some of these things probably sound easier than they are in reality. So how much, you talk a lot about empathy, but does it mean that you never yell at them, or where is the limit?
I have to admit, one of the hardest skills that I teach people is empathy. Because it doesn't seem natural, does it? When our kids yelling and whining, they whined in a certain way when they were little, but they still whine when they're teenagers, don't they? And it's like, oh yeah, that's so hard, and being able to say that without laughing or without saying like, oh yeah, just get over it. It's like, it's like, they're allowed to whine, just do it in your room, and it's hard not to yell and it's hard not to tell. The thing that I hope that you take away from the presentation isn't that you're the worst parent in the whole world. It's that you have the ability to now consciously think a little bit harder about how you're interacting with your teen. And that if you want to change your relationship with them, the only thing that's going to change it is you. And so you coming up with some ways to change whatever your thing is. Like for me, I was the helicopter. Like I had to stop rescuing because my son was growing up whining and complaining, and he thought that life was supposed to be a 10. And every day he woke up, he thought it was disappointing. And it's like, that was not my intention. My intention was to make life a 10 if I could, but that is so unrealistic that I set him up. And so luckily I learned these skills when my kid was in about middle school. It's not much different than you all. And by me rescuing him all the time, I had that slide about letting them make mistakes. Like I let him. Like if he made mistakes with his friends, I would just say, wow, that was really hard. And we'd talk about it. Or if school would get hard, like he was an athlete and it would be hard with coaches or whatever. It's like, wow, wonder how you're going to get over that. Instead of me going to talk to the coach. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, you don't want to be talking to coaches and teachers and stuff like that as a parent of a high schooler. It's like, but you could be a consultant and say like, I don't know, how do you think you could talk to that coach differently or that teacher differently? And so I was able to, I had to consciously do it. And sometimes I had to ask my friends to hold me accountable, kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous, so like, please make sure that I don't tell my kid what to do. One of my kids got a traffic ticket and I was just dying inside to, he got the ticket at, you guys know exactly where this is. It's at Lawrence Expressway and Prospect. He ran a red light, but it was yellow, right? It's like he was just shaking. He was so upset and all this stuff. And like, I was calm because like, it's just a mistake. He's going to get over it. And, I had to hold myself back from scheduling when he, it takes a while to get the ticket in the mail, and it takes a while for it to become apparent how much it was. It was like $600 ticket. That was a lot. I did not pay it. My son did. And it's like wiped him out and all. It was like, oh, that's so sad. What a bummer. He doesn't run through red lights much anymore. He thinks about it now because I let him own that. Lots of parents, some parents, not lots of parents, but some parents would pay the ticket and they would make sure that they signed up for court on time, and they would make sure that they signed up for traffic school on time. I didn't do that. And I had to have my friends and my husband keep me honest about not nagging him to do it, because I'm super organized and I can get it done. But me doing it for my son would have ruined it. So that's the kind of things I sound so rational and nice and everything right now, but it's like I went through lots with my boys, and it was up and down, and it required me to be thoughtful and be willing to allow them to own their own lives and to hold them accountable and to come up with some creative ways to let them do things like owning their mistakes and learning about money and learning about chores. They had part-time jobs. They were busy boys, and they still played games. One of them wanted to be a professional gamer. It's like I had to deal with that. Like electronics, I know a lot about electronics, a lot. My son went to college and he was going to want to drop out to become a professional gamer. He got to semi-pro, and I'm like, it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, and we survived. And he's working in a high-tech job now, and he's doing great. He still plays games for fun, but not as a career. So, it takes perseverance, it takes love, and it takes communication. And having that communication with your kid is going to, like I said, it's going to be what saves you, what gets you through parenthood. And it can be so rewarding. I love being with my kids. Both of my kids don't live in the area anymore, but we talk all the time. We're going to have a cooking night on Zoom on Saturday night. It's like we love being together, because we haven't damaged our relationship. We saved our relationship by communicating well.
Yeah. So I think that's understandable when you're talking about traffic tickets and such. But what would you say, when kids are starting to prepare for colleges, how much should how much of a helicopter parent you should be, helping them decide, events to attend, colleges to check out and stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, it's another favorite topic of mine, getting into colleges, because my kids were at a super high pressure high school. And I think that I firmly believe there's a college for everyone. And I think there's a lot of kids who get pushed towards colleges that aren't for them, and they wind up coming home broken. I think that allowing your kid to choose a college that's right for them and to think about it, as opposed to choosing a name brand that a parent might like more than others. I think that you being there to talk about that stuff, what is important, and what is it that they're going to study. I had one of my good friends, their son he happened to get kind of an athletic scholarship, but he chose to go to a school that didn't have his major, and he came home. It didn't work because that matchup, which I think is crucial, was missing something. And I think it would have been a better match if he had not been guided by this one aspect of his search. So I want you to be involved in that, and I don't want you to control it, though. I think kids need to be responsible for things like getting their recommendation letters from teachers, and filling out the things and signing up for the SAT and all that stuff. It's all part of their adulting process. And if they're not ready for it, I think that the local community colleges are a great, great place to start for kids who aren't ready for that responsibility. Because we parents, we can get them into a college if we really wanted, but can the kid handle it? Can they get all the ducks in line? And if they can't get the ducks in line, then it's a good signal for you to that's too bad. I thought he was going to go to Harvard, but I guess he's going to go to De Anza. And De Anza is a great place for lots of people, or West Valley, or wherever.
Okay.
So
I have a question here for the times. Basically, how do you deal with students who are kind of withdrawing, or who are avoiding going back to school, or participating in limited activities available, just because they have been away for it so long that they are now withdrawn from school activities?
My advice would be to reach out to the counseling staff at Prospect, probably. It rings to me towards mental health and seeing if there's resources there or through other therapy resources. I don't know if you guys as a PTA has some resources that you're going to try to put in place for families. That's, like, it's hard. I mean, the best thing that I could recommend as a parent is to try to have those avenues of communication so that your child at least feels that there's somebody that's still on their side that can understand how scary it might be to go back to school or how much they hated school in the first place or whatever. It's like, you can't make a kid like school, but you can give them empathy about yeah, school sucks. But what do you want to do in the long term? Do you want to live at mom and dad's house forever? Because we're going to start charging rent when you hit 18. That kind of tough love-ish kind of stuff, but in a loving manner.
Sounds good. So I don't have any other questions. Selena, do you have any other questions in your chat? Okay. So Mary, thanks a lot. I think that was an amazing presentation. We all learned a lot today.
Well, thanks for having me. And I hope it helps. And if anybody needs help, just give me an email or go on to my podcast or whatever. I'd really love to help you more.
Absolutely. We'll send across the information to all the parents.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you, Mary. And I think we have passed our time as well. And so we'd like to wrap up the meeting too.
Great.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a good night. Bye.